So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
Hello, New Garden students. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for coming back for another week of what to do when you don't know what to do. Just a few reminders. One, Monday Night Crew is happening on Zoom Mondays at 4 o'clock. We would love for you to be there. We've been looking at discipleship in the book of John and looking at what disciples do. So we would love for you to join us Mondays at 4 for Monday Night Crew. Also, we will be on Zoom on Wednesday night at 7, talking about this lesson, hanging out, maybe playing a game. So you should be there. It's going to be great. The links for those Zoom calls are at newgarden.church/chat. So we would love to see you there. This week, we're in week 4 of this series. It's a long one, but it is interesting and crazy nonetheless. But I want to ask you, what is your favorite movie? Or maybe some of your favorite movies if you can't pick one. I want you to bring them to your mind. Think about what makes a great movie, why you love that movie. And I bet for most of us, we like our favorite movies because we connect to the characters, right? We like the characters. Writers and producers and directors work really hard to create characters that people can connect with and like and want to watch. And a lot of that has to do with their backstory. The things we know about characters are not just good things, right? We know about them growing up, and we know the struggles that they have. We know about mistakes they've made. And because of all of this, we like them even more, and it adds so much to their storyline. One of my favorite movies is The Princess Diaries. And if you haven't seen The Princess Diaries, first of all, you should check it out. It's on Disney Plus. You should watch it. But it's about a girl who's in high school, and she's like not popular, and she has never known her dad, but she knows that he died recently. And then out of the blue, her dad's mom, her grandmother, comes to visit her and tells her that she's a princess, which is crazy. And she doesn't really like getting this news at first. She's very shocked. And then she wonders why her mom never told her. It causes a strain in that relationship. Her best friend gets mad at her. It causes a lot of issues and a lot of problems. But at the end of the story, she gets crowned the Princess of Genovia. She goes to the ball, she gets there, and everything is great. But if you fast forward to the end of the story, you don't appreciate it as much as when you've watched all that she has gone through to get to this point, because we know her backstory, we see what she's gone through, we care about what happens to her, and it makes the story so much more meaningful. And we see that even through the bad stuff, like, there was purpose in it. And we all have things in our own lives, in our own backstories, right? We have things that have happened in the past that have been hard or painful in different ways. And maybe you can look back at some of those things and recognize that good came from them. Maybe you've seen God work in hard things in your lives, and that's really awesome. Maybe there are some other things in your backstory that were hard that you haven't really seen good come from. And that is totally possible because unfortunately our lives are not just like movies where at the end you're going to get crowned the Princess of Genovia, right? Like sometimes there are things that are just hard in our lives. But we're going to talk about today that even hard things that happen, God can work in them and work in our lives, even though those things are happening, and work for good. But sometimes there are things that are happening right now, right? It's not just in your backstory, but it's in your current story that there are struggles and pain and hard stuff that's going on right now. And you're wondering, why is this happening? What's the point of this? Like, is this going to lead to anything good? It's especially hard to think that something good is going to come from something bad that's happening right now. It's easier sometimes to see that in retrospect, but if something is happening now, it can sometimes feel pointless, right? Like, why am I having to endure this pain, this hard situation? What good could possibly come from that? And we are going to be talking about Joseph again today. We've been following the life of Joseph. This is the 4th week we've been talking about him. He's got a lot of crazy stuff in his life, and today is no different from that. And Joseph is definitely a person who probably was wondering at many points in his life, why is this hard thing happening to me? This probably feels like there's no purpose in it. There's no point in me experiencing something so difficult. And just to give you a refresher, because I know we've talked about a lot of different things that have happened in his life, I drew up a little timeline for us. So when we met Joseph, he was at home, right? And he had a bunch of brothers, and he was his dad's favorite, and his dad had given him this beautiful robe, and the brothers were really mad at some stuff that he had said and were plotting to kill him. And instead of killing him, they sold him into slavery, which happened here. But they told their dad that he was dead, right? They took his robe and dipped it in animal blood and were like, sorry, Dad, your favorite son is dead, which is rough. But he was sold into slavery, and then he landed in Potiphar's house, which we talked about last week. And he was serving Potiphar, who was really, really high up in Egypt. And Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, but he said no. But then she accused him of coming on to her, and so he got thrown into prison. He was falsely accused of something and in prison. And that's where we're picking up today. And this whole blue line over here is him in prison. And so we're going to talk about all that happened while he was in prison today, and even more wild stuff that happened with him. So that's your little refresher on the life of Joseph. And we're picking up today in Genesis 40, verse 1. So it says, sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. So the cupbearer and the baker are 2 of Pharaoh's highest servants. They're doing stuff for him all the time. The cupbearer is someone who would test the wine that was brought to Pharaoh just to make sure it wasn't poisoned, right? So these 2 guys did something that ticked off Pharaoh, and because he can do literally whatever he wants, he was mad, so he put him in prison. And that's where they are now. And they're in the same prison with Joseph. And the story goes on. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So Joseph is talking to these guys who both had dreams, right? And which is interesting because dreams were kind of the thing that first got Joseph in trouble earlier in his life with his brothers, if you remember back to week 1. But he's saying, I can interpret your dreams for you. Even here in prison, where he has been falsely accused, he is still trying to honor God and trying to do what is right, and help these guys. So he interprets their dreams. And the cupbearer has a dream that Joseph says means he is going to, again, like be in favor with Pharaoh, that he's going to get out and be okay and it's going to be great. The baker's dream, not as great. It's not going to go well for him. And both of those things came true. So we see the cupbearer go back to Pharaoh, and he's like serving Pharaoh again, testing his wine, doing what he's supposed to do, all this stuff. And you would think that he would come back and be like, Pharaoh, I gotta tell you about this guy I met in prison. He interpreted my dream, and it was true. It's what happened. His name is Joseph. You should let him out. But he didn't. That's not what happened. He forgot about Joseph. He literally got out of prison and forgot about the guy who told him what was about to happen. So realistically, these two dots are really close together. I just spaced them out all the same, not in chronological order. But there are 2 years right here between when Joseph helps the cupbearer and the baker and when Pharaoh finally needs help interpreting a dream of his own. That is when the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph. After 2 years of being free from prison, Pharaoh has a dream and needs some help of his own. And that is when the cupbearer says, I know a guy, we were in prison together, he can help you out. So we see after all of this hard and crazy stuff that Joseph has experienced in his life, that he is allowing God, to work through him and to be a light in the life of other people, even though it doesn't always work out great for him, right? We saw a lot of that last week, that he chooses what is right, even if it's going to be hard in the future. And I'm just imagining those 2 years between when the cupbearer got out of prison and before Joseph did, him sitting there wondering, like, why am I here? What is the point? Why has any of this happened to me? Like, I have found myself a slave and a prisoner, and now I'm just stuck here and I don't know what to do. And later on, we're going to see that Joseph does get out of prison. He helps Pharaoh interpret his dream. And then he becomes second in command under Pharaoh, which sounds like a whole, like, Princess Diaries story, right? Like, from just a regular person, or no, Joseph was a prisoner. It was not good for him. But now he's second in command. But even still, we've seen that if Pharaoh gets mad, he can do whatever he wants. So wild stuff. And Joseph has every right to be wondering, like, what the point is in all of these things, right? But we see that in every difficult situation, Joseph is in a unique position to do something that honors God that only he can do in that situation. He continues to make decisions that honor God. He continues to just, like, be a good person to the people around him, even when things are not going his way. And that is not to say that all of this hard, terrible stuff happened to Joseph so that he could be a good person in hard circumstances. No, right? Because we've seen that people can mess up stuff for other people. I do not think that God is inflicting these horrible circumstances on Joseph so that it can put him to the test and he can be a light in the darkness or anything like that, right? We've seen that this is a result of mistakes, a result of sin, a result of just life, right? A lot of times just hard things happen that we can't explain. And it's not God doing something to you. It's not that God wants bad for your life. Life is just really hard sometimes. But I want us to see that even in the hard stuff, God is at work. Romans 8:28 says, "We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose." So the hardest, most painful experiences we have in our lives, they're not the end of the story, right? They may be our story right now, but one day they'll be our backstory, like in the characters of the movies we love, right? And God is still working in those things. So when you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for a purpose. And there are a few things that can help us to get a bigger perspective on those things. One, remember that no one else has your life story. I remember when I was younger, I remember thinking distinctly, I don't have a story, right? It felt so familiar to me and maybe uneventful because I knew it so well that I felt like I didn't have a story to tell at all. But that's not true. Each of us has a unique set of life events and experiences and things that we've gone through that make our lives unique, and we all have a story to tell. And that makes your perspective unique. The way you experience life is different from the way I do because of the things that we've gone through. And that's important. And the second thing is that your story can interact with others. Maybe you have heard someone talking about the way they feel about something or something they've gone through and had that feeling of oh, you think that too? I feel the same way. And that's a powerful thing, to realize that you are not alone in a feeling or in a situation, even if they're not exactly the same, right? To know that someone feels the same way as you is huge. Maybe you have had a loved one get sick and you know someone else that has happened to, and you've been able to be there for each other in those things. Or maybe you went through a breakup and you knew someone else that had experienced that, and you were able to seek wisdom from them and they could support you in that. Similar hard experiences as someone else is powerful, and it helps us to support each other and helps us to allow God to work in our lives in a way that wouldn't be possible without those things. So I want us to be those people who allow God to work in the hard stuff. It's not always easy, right? And sometimes in the midst of it, it can feel pointless. Sometimes it can feel impossible to imagine that God could bring anything good or purposeful from the pain that we're in. But I want us to remember the story of Joseph and the craziness that he has gone through and the way that he keeps honoring God in each situation. And remember Romans 8:28, that God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. and that in all things, when we don't know what to do, our problems can position us for a purpose and allow God to work in the hard stuff in our lives. So I hope that you will join us on Zoom on Wednesday at 7 as we unpack some of this a little bit more and hang out together. So see you then.